Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week, our guest is the CEO of the Nevada Independent, Jon Ralston. I didn't know he had such a fancy title, James. Together, we'll be taking a look at what we can expect there in the midterms. Remember, we love taking your questions, so write in to politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. We'll get to as many as we can, but don't forget to tell us where you're from. And please check out the links to our sponsors, HoldOn Bags, the Jordan Harbinger Show, and Miracle Brand in the show notes. We thank you for supporting our sponsors. It helps make this podcast happen. Please tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, James, this is a crazy quilt political season. It started off where it was going to be historical. Republicans were going to take over the House and the Senate. Then after the abortion decision in June, it looked like the Democrats were making a comeback. Still looks that way. But it just is, it's really kind of remarkable that one day you'll feel optimistic and the next day you're not so sure. One example, Washington Post ABC poll came out last weekend, showed the Republicans preferred by 5 points in the congressional preference. And Democrats said, oh, my God, that is a disaster. Then 2 days later, Ann Selzer, as good as it gets in polling, comes out with a poll for Grinnell College. It shows the Democrats up 4 in congressional preference. Politico comes out Wednesday with one that shows them up 2. What's happening out there, James?
Did the Post poll say +5 Republican?
Well, that's what I thought it was only 1 or 2, and then I looked at it today, and they were all saying it was +5. But whatever it was plus Republicans.
Yes. The first thing is people, maybe we expect too much out of polling, particularly polling this far out. And I've just never been in a race where you don't get some bad polls at some point. And when you get them, they feel bad, and then you say, well, I shouldn't have worried about it. But every now and then you see one in, it's like that Ann Selzer poll in Iowa in 2020 that showed that Trump won Iowa by a lot and losing the Senate seat. And well, that probably might be a bad poll. It wasn't. It was a good poll. But you're right. Ann Selzer poll, I think, carries more weight than any public poll that I see. But, on the whole, that's why people pay attention to averages, because they kind of account for this.
Yeah, and I think, look, it's less than 6 weeks out. Things can change. You've noted many times that if you have 6 toss-up races, the natural thing to do is say 3 will go one way, 3 will go the other way. No, that's not the way it usually happens. Usually 5 go one way and one the other. But I just looking at everything right now, I would say the odds favor the Democrats keeping the Senate and the Republicans keeping the House. Though, both it could reverse in both places.
I guess and everybody says that the Republicans are favored to win the House, but if you look at the generics, it doesn't. I don't know if you could say. Obviously, the Democrats need some more votes than Republicans to keep the House. It's just the way it. Trust me, it's less than it used to be. But some people say 2, some people say 3. Well, that's about where it's sitting now. And some of these interference campaigns that I totally supported, that some people were gassed about. I see our friend Jeff Garum totally supports it, could make the difference. If the Democrats keep it by a couple of 3 seats, you're going to be able to say that. But it's just so ingrained that the Republicans are the favorite, and they have been for a long time, and a lot of things do favor them. I guess it's fair to say they're a slight favorite, but no more than a slight favorite.
Well, but 4 months ago it was 80-90% the Republicans would win. Now the Democrats, I don't know what it is, James. They got a 30-40% shot at winning. That ain't bad.
Right, not bad. It's better. It's better than it was. That's all I can tell you. I can't tell you how good it is. And
James, let me switch.
I can't tell you if it's going to stay.
Let me switch subjects on you. Something you know a lot about. The hurricane season is on us. Fiona wreaked havoc on Puerto Rico. and Canada, and now Ian is threatening Florida, devastated Cuba. As a Louisianan, you follow this closely. Give us a sense of what we're to expect.
Well, okay, so let's remember a couple of things. Number one is you don't, the bad side of a storm in the northern hemisphere is the upper right-hand quadrant. Now, if to the extent there was any good news out of this, Tampa looks like it's going to get a lot of flooding and street flooding, and it's going to get bad weather, and there'll be something, but it's not going to be catastrophic because Tampa is on the left-hand side of the eye. So Fort Myers and Naples are going to get it a lot worse than Tampa. And it's almost certain to come ashore at a place called Boca Grande, which is a nice barrier island that the Boca Grande will not exist tomorrow, I promise you. The one other point I want to make is that we're accustomed to category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This storm, a 5 is 157 mile an hour wind. This storm has 155. But the better scholarship and people say that the wind speed is just one indication. The size of the storm, the amount of water that it has, is also can be even as important or more important than the wind. And by all of these categories, this storm is a 5.
Yeah.
All right. It may be 2 miles an hour short on the wind, but by every other category, it's going to be a 5. And it is going to cause extensive damage to Southwest Florida. But the only, I guess you'd say good news on that, but the nightmare scenario is that of any storm is you have a slow-moving storm along the west coast of Florida because there's so many people live there and it's so vulnerable. And you almost had this, and it just stays there and pounds it. But this is going to cause a lot of damage. No one dodged a bullet, but they're getting hit with a bullet, but they could have gotten hit with a artillery shell if it had come ashore at Clearwater. Whew, that would have been bad. This is bad. This is horrible, but it could have been worse.
Yeah. James, we've had hurricanes for ages, forever probably. How much of what's happening in the last couple of years and this year is affected by climate change?
Well, obviously, I have to go what other people say, and what they're saying is the number of hurricanes not necessarily up, but the amount of water that they hold is definitely up. It was an interesting piece of weather research in Louisiana. They determined that it doesn't rain any more often than it used to. It just rains harder. And you look at what happened. Hurricane Harvey was a real telling event where it was just slow moving and it stayed there and just dumped water after water after water. There was some chance that this was going to be a really slow moving storm. But thank God, I don't think that. I hope it holds up where you want them, as bad as they are, you want them to get the hell in there and get out. All right? And the forward speed does add something to the wind levels, but that's not the problem. You don't want that thing sitting over you for 3 days dumping water. And there's one more point I want to make about this storm. It's going to get back, it looks like it's going to get back out in the Atlantic for a little while and come back ashore in Charleston. If for any reason that storm tracks a little further east and stays over water for a longer time, I don't think the East Coast is out of the woods. I mean, I know Charleston is not out of the woods, but what they're supposed to get is a strong tropical storm. But these things, they're living organisms. You think of a hurricane, you think of it's like anything, it tries to survive. And the way it survives is over warm water and warm air. And it will seek that out wherever it goes. It's just, it acts like a living thing. It acts like an animal. It does everything it can to survive.
And what's the October outlook for your area, Louisiana, Mississippi?
Right now, there's a strong high pressure. That's why the storm is going aboard at Florida. If you look at the weather map, you'll see there's a high pressure area which extends all the way south of Louisiana. And again, that storm is a living organism. It does not like dry air. It does not like high pressure. It does not like cooler air. So it's going. So fortunately, if we get this high pressure area to stay over us, every day that we have this high pressure, it's one more day that we get to November the 1st, which is traditionally, the level it used to be. If you got through October the 5th, you were fine. That's not true anymore. So we had a mercifully tame year in the northern Gulf of Mexico, but that don't predict much. But I just hope this high pressure stays around. As long as it stays around, we're fine.
Amen. Amen. Okay. James, you remember the one word, plastic. It's everywhere we look, and not enough is being done about it. Over 100 billion plastic bags are being used and then thrown away every year. That plastic bag you see in the gutter or floating in a stream or washed up on the beach, multiply that by 100 billion, yikes, right? But there's a better way, and it starts with a better bag. That's why we're proud to support HoldOn Bags. They're on a mission to be a key part of the growing movement away from single-use plastic. Single-use plastic creates so much waste, and every expert and every bit of common sense tells us it's the single worst kind of plastic at every stage: production, disposal, and decomposition. Plastic bags are doing harm to our earth, our water, and even our bodies. That's why HoldOn trash and kitchen bags are heavy-duty, plant-based, non-toxic, and 100% home compostable. That means they break down in weeks, not decades, all without filling our landfills or polluting our oceans. We all need to take action to start healing the planet. And I'll tell you, HoldOn Bags are a great way to start. They just sent some to me last week, and they are terrific, and they look great, too. They're green, James. They are really, this is something that's important.
This is a great, and they're exactly right. The plastic bags that end up in our waterways and our landfills everywhere else is appalling, and this is a superb product.
Well, you'll be delighted, and I thank you, HoldOn Bags, for sending them to us. We really love them. It makes daily chores something you can feel good about. One bag at a time. To shop plant-based bags and replace single-use plastics all over your home, visit HoldOnBags.com and enter War Room at checkout to save 20% off your order. Sustainability has never been more simple. That's HoldOnBags.com, HoldOn Bags.com, and enter War Room to receive 20% off your order. Small things can lead to lasting change if we stop and say, hold on. Thank you, HoldOn, for sponsoring this episode. You also can find the link in our show notes. Hey, James, in a number of states, there's a go-to expert on politics, a journalist, a political analyst. There is no better go-to expert than the Silver State's Jon Ralston. I wouldn't think of writing a sentence about Nevada without calling Jon Ralston. He is terrific. I didn't know until today he was the CEO, so I'm really impressed now. But, John, there's a number of top races out in Nevada, but most eyes in Washington are focused on the Senate race, where Catherine Cortez Masto is one of the two most endangered Democratic incumbents, running against Adam Laxalt, grandson of one of the state's legendary politicians, Paul Laxalt. How do you size up that race with less than 6 weeks to go?
Alan, James, it's kind of a microcosm of what's going on in this country in the sense that the race is a toss-up. Every poll I've seen, public and private, shows it within a few points either way. There's some thought among the Republicans that it's starting to tilt a little bit towards Laxalt, but I wouldn't make any definitive pronouncements in late September about a race this close. But the reason I say it's a microcosm is that Catherine Cortez Masto, while she may not be that well known nationally, is kind of the workhorse, not a show horse kind of senator. She's very disciplined. She's running actually what Republicans and Democrats here agree is the best campaign in the state in many ways. And she's running against a guy who, in Adam Laxalt, who I know everyone in the national media talks about Blake Masters or Herschel Walker or Dr. Oz as being these terrible candidates. Adam Laxalt is right there with them. He is a terrible candidate in many, many different ways. And yet he is within the margin of error in a purple state. Partly because we're a purple state, but also partly because of the general national atmospherics. Biden's numbers are terrible here. We have the highest gas prices, or very close to it, in the country. And so she's having to wear a lot of that.
John, one of the keys will be the Latino vote, as much as 20%. It has traditionally been a decidedly Democratic vote. She's the only Latino woman, I think, in the United States Senate. Yet Republicans say they are have made strides with the Hispanic male voters in particular. How well does each have to do with that, with the Latino vote in Nevada?
So, the Republicans see an opportunity this time, Al, because they see some of these polling data. They see Hispanics started maybe to move away from the Democratic Party in the 2020 election. And so suddenly they've discovered, what? There's Spanish language television and radio? We should get on that. And so they are starting to do that a little bit now. Kevin Cortez Masto is the first Latina ever elected to the U.S. Senate, as you mentioned. And she has not worn that on her sleeve, though, but she's starting to do that a little bit more in this race. Now, you guys both know how difficult it is to poll in Nevada. The last poll I saw showed Catherine Cortez Masto with a 19-point lead among Hispanics in Nevada, but she wasn't even at 50%. It was 44-25. So that's a warning beacon for her, although generally in this state, Hispanics, and again, you can't generalize about any demographic being monolithic, but they generally decide later than most voters. And so I think they feel that they're on track. And listen, if she doesn't get much more than 50% among Latinos, she's going to lose the race.
Right. John, Nevada had one of the most effective Democratic parties and organizations in America, led by the late Harry Reid. Now, or last year, or earlier this year, the left-wing Democratic Socialists have taken over the party. That has to hurt Democrats, doesn't it?
I think it does, because the so-called Reid machine, which was legendary here in the state and was copied in other states in many different ways, was able to spend a fortune through the party, registering voters, then turning them out, and essentially bank all these votes in the 2-week early voting period that election day they couldn't change the outcome. That's happened in cycle after cycle here. Now they can't use what Harry Reid, who, by the way, I'm writing a book about, use the party as a legalized money laundering operation, right? There's different rules that apply to parties. So they've had to set up a parallel organization that doesn't quite have the same freedom. And the registration numbers are not what they used to be. The Democrats' lead of less than 3% overall now over Republicans is the lowest it's been in a long, long time. And so there's great worry out there that not only because of branding, because, Republicans always call Democrats socialists, as both of you well know, but now they can really say it because the socialists run the Democratic Party here. So they tried to separate from that. The parallel organization called Nevada Democratic Victory has done a fairly effective job in going after Laxalt and the Republican gubernatorial nominee as well, but it's just not quite the same.
James.
Well, I'll just make an observation. I'll go right to the question. The DSA people, so let me get this straight. We have one of the most successful state parties in the United States. And let's take it over, because it's just winning too goddamn many elections. And so let's take it over. Let's turn it into something extreme left, and we can lose and then talk about what ethical people we are. It makes no goddamn sense. So John, obviously I talked to Scott Fairchild last night, Mastos' campaign manager. And he pointed out, and he wanted me to talk to you about this, that there are like 5 other candidates on the ballot. And you don't need 50 to win. What number do you think is going to end up being a winning number election night in Nevada?
That's a really good question, James. And Scott Fairchild is right to bring that up, because even if it's a dead heat between Adam Laxalt and Catherine Cortez Masto, there are not only other candidates on the ballot, but don't forget we have this unique and crazy thing in Nevada called none of these candidates for all
Right.
statewide races. And so people who are disgusted with both candidates, can't make up their minds, whatever, can throw their votes there. So it's going to be less than 50%. Adam Laxalt has never gotten close to 50% in his two statewide races. And so, I think that the mid to the high 40s can probably win this race, James, and probably will. I mean, 48, 46, something like that could be the result.
Right. I think Scott thinks it could be like between 46 and 47. I mean, he didn't say that, but she didn't get 50 the last time that she ran. That's a real aspiration. Well, how it's widely believed that the governor is in the Democratic governor, Governor Sisolak, who I did a fundraiser at my place in New Orleans for, is he running behind Mastos? Is that perception correct? Because that's certainly the perception that a lot of people have.
Well, I will use again the caveat that it's very difficult to poll in Nevada,
Gotcha.
and I trust very few pollsters, excuse me, in Nevada. But generally, that has not been true,
Right.
James. That Sisolak is doing a little bit better than Catherine Cortez Masto
Oh, wow.
in a lot of the polls. And the Sisolak campaign, I think, is more confident, or Democrats are more confident about Sisolak than they are about Catherine Cortez Masto, which, by the way, I'm not sure is the right frame of mind to be in this time. But there are polls that show him as much as 4 points ahead, 5 points ahead of Joe Lombardo, who's the sheriff of Clark County, who was the Republican nominee. And what's really interesting, James, and you'll find this interesting, is I thought at the beginning that the Republicans would have a much easier time of tying Catherine Cortez Masto to Biden than Sisolak for obvious reasons, right? But almost the entire campaign, or not the entire campaign, but a lot of the campaign of Joe Lombardo, the Republican running for governor, is to tie Sisolak to Biden and his low numbers here. And they have Catherine Cortez Masto has done a very good job of trying to distinguish herself from Biden, but she still can't get out from under the 37% approval rating.
So I just get your view. The general view, and I kind of hold it myself, is that Biden is kind of detached. In every election, the president, they morph every candidate into Clinton in 94, to do the same thing to Obama in 2010. It seems as though Biden is somewhat detached from people's preference in voting for Senate, governor, or House. I mean, I'm not totally detached, but more detached than usual. Is that your observation?
Are you saying that people are seeing him as detached, or that he's actually detached from it?
What I'm saying is that a lot of people who don't approve of Biden are still voting for the Democratic candidate. It's not usually they're kind of joined at the hip. It seems this cycle, for reasons that'll be explored in depth if they hold up, that Biden, the Democratic candidate is not as tied to Biden in sort of vote preference.
Well, campaigns matter, as you know better than anybody, James. And so the campaigns that are doing that more successfully on the Republican side are going to have more success with it, I think. Listen, all Adam Laxalt can do is talk about Joe Biden and Catherine Cortez Masto. How effective it is, I'm not so sure. I think she, as I said, she's done a good job of distinguishing herself from Biden. But I don't think it's, even though they're very happy with themselves in the Republican Party in the governor's race, tying Sisolak to Biden for no apparent real nexus, I don't think it's working.
All right, so I'm going to turn back to Al to make an observation and then a quick question. I've done a couple of Zoom events with Mastos, and she's a pretty good candidate. I mean, there's just this general feeling that people get that she's not. I thought I mean, I've seen a lot of candidates before. I'm not going to say that she's Bill Clinton or something, but she's pretty damn good, I thought.
I think you're right, actually, James. She's a much better candidate, for instance, than when she first got into politics and ran for attorney general, and much better candidate than she was in 2016 when she first won in a relatively close race. She's very disciplined. She can actually show some fire now, which she hasn't been able to do really, and just let it all out as she has in the past. As I said, there are a lot of people, smart operatives, some of whom you know, James, and others on the Republican side, who think that her campaign is the best in the state.
So I got to tell one story, Alan, because you're involved in it. So John, Al and Mayor Oscar Goodman went to school together in main line of Philadelphia. So we were out in Las Vegas and we had lunch for him. And I said, of course, it was McCarran Airport. And I said, Mayor, tell me, was Senator McCarran, is he as corrupt as Senator Gary was in The Godfather? He said, oh, no, James, he was a lot more corrupt.
Yeah, McCarran was an awful guy. He was an absolutely awful guy.
He was actually a Democrat, too, I think.
Yeah, he was.
Thank God y'all changed the name of that airport.
Yeah.
One of the great communist witch hunters of all time.
Yeah.
James, Oscar also, one of the things he was most proud of in Las Vegas was the Mob Museum. Is that still there, John? Still flourishing?
It is, and it's from what I understand, it's doing better than ever, Al. And a lot of people, including me, by the way, didn't think it was going to be successful, but it's been pretty successful.
God, Oscar loved that. Oscar, who himself was as straight as could be, represented a lot of mobsters. Let me ask you a couple more things. There's a few congressional races out there that also are being contested. Is there any outlook for change there?
So, we have three supposedly possible flips to the Republicans here out of the four races. One of our congressional races isn't a race at all, but the other three are. There's some internal bickering among Democrats, especially Dina Titus, who complains that they took too many Democrats out of her district to shore up Stephen Horsford and Susie Lee. Those races all appear to be close. But I still believe if you look at the registration numbers, and if what James said is correct, is that Biden is getting detached in some of these races, and I think he is in some of those, then they should all win. All three of those Democrats should win. But Susie Lee is probably in the most jeopardy in the swing district in Nevada.
Right. We talked earlier about how Laxalt and other Republicans were hitting hard on inflation and high gas prices, and that's clearly understandable. How about abortion? Is that an issue out there?
Well, it's become an issue here since Dobbs, of course. I mean, I still feel that if I ran into Catherine Cortez Masto on the street and said, boy, the Raiders really are terrible this year, she would say, do you know what Adam Laxalt's position is on abortion? I mean, that's essentially all she wants to talk about, and with good reason, I think. And the governor, by the way, is starting to use that a lot, too, because Joe Lombardo has had some conflicting statements on abortion. How much difference is that going to make? In those races that could be very close, it could make a difference. Again, I'll repeat the cliche again, campaigns matter. Whoever executes this well over the home stretch. And let's not forget something else that you mentioned, Al, this so-called Democratic machine that has been so effective in turning out, especially base voters in early voting. We're going to know when early voting starts in about 3 weeks whether that's happening. If that's not happening, that's going to be a real warning sign for Democrats up and down the ticket.
I believe Nevada had a referendum in the 90s on abortion, which on abortion rights, which carried rather decisively, didn't it?
Yeah, and that's I'm glad you brought that up. In 1990, there was the pro-choice forces put on the ballot the actual statute, which you can do, which is a 24-week statute, and it passed overwhelmingly 2-1. All the polling shows that Nevada remains a solidly 2-1 pro-choice state. But this is what the Republicans are doing now, is they're saying it's settled law in Nevada. You can't change it. It can only be changed by a referendum. Now, Laxalt is foolishly said he would try to overturn that referendum, and he wants a 13-week abortion law. But Lombardo has said he supports the will of the people. Don't talk about abortion. It's settled law here. Now, of course, there are things that could happen. A federal ban is possible, and you can still do things as a governor. You can propose other kinds of laws that limit access to abortion. And so the Democrats are saying, no, it's not settled. But they are trying to use that referendum that you referred to, Al, to try to take that issue off the table.
One more before turning back to James. Are both Lombardo and Laxalt Trumpers?
Laxalt is a complete Trumper. He ran the Trump campaign here. He was the leader of the big lie right after the election. And he's even said that he's going to sue in this election just to make the election closer if he thinks he needs to. He has been that offhanded about it. Lombardo in the primary had a bunch of opponents, as you may or may not know, including former Senator Dean Heller and a real true out-and-out conspiracy theorist Trumper lawyer from Reno by the name of Joey Gilbert, who was the natural person to get the Trump endorsement. Gilbert started to get some traction, and then suddenly someone got to Trump. And you guys may know that Chris Carr, Trump's former political director, is working for Lombardo, and suddenly Trump endorsed Lombardo. Lombardo's not a Trumper, but now he's trying to thread the needle, right? He took the guy's endorsement, and in something that both of you guys will appreciate, he came out very early and stood next to the sheriff of Clark County. Remember, he's the sheriff of by far the largest county, and the first thing Trump says that got all the headlines, this place is a cesspool of crime. This is what Trump says standing next to the sheriff he just endorsed.
Oh God! You can't make a movie about it. Go ahead, James.
So John, tell us a little bit about your book about one of my favorite people that ever lived, Senator Harry Reid, and what's the timing on the book, and what's the sort of storyline here? Tell us a little bit tease your book a little bit for us.
Listen, this has been an even more massive and exhausting project than I ever thought it would be, James, to tell this guy's story. He is, I think, I can make this case pretty easily, the most influential, powerful elected official in Nevada history, and one of the most consequential figures nationally of the last quarter century or so that he was in office. But there's so much more that even I didn't know about him, and I knew him as well as anybody in the media, certainly. And I finally got him to agree to it, and he did 24 Zoom interviews with me before he passed away, and I got a lot of great stuff. And I've interviewed a lot of different people, his colleagues, former President Obama, Hillary Clinton, a lot of other people to talk about. So I have a lot of great material, but it's been a slog, and so I'm going to turn in the manuscript, I hope, in February sometime. But as far as when it gets published, my guess is, and you guys know this about books, there's going to be a lag time. And those damn editors, they want to edit. And so that'll happen as well. So my guess is it'll come out in early 2024.
Well, I look forward to it, and knowing you and knowing Senator Reid, and I think it's going to be by far the authoritative biography of Senator Reid, maybe of anybody. And you're right. What a consequential figure, and a very successful political figure. So I honestly can't wait for the book at all. And the other thing about Senator Reid,
it's a great story outside of.
Oh yeah, and by the way, very good. Susan McHugh was the youngest female chief of staff in history of the Senate at the time. He recruited females all over Nevada. Nevada maybe still is. I know it was the only majority female state legislature in the country.
It is.
I mean, he's got a real good record of bringing a lot of people into the party.
It's all true.
Well, John, I was going to say, James, if James and I are still around kicking, when that book comes out, right after it comes out, we want to have you as a guest on the show just to talk about that book. Okay, James?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But Al, I think you got to go further than that. You should promise me a book party in Washington, and I want one in New Orleans as well, James.
All right. We'll definitely do that.
Okay, I guess we got it. Yes, we're on. We're on.
Yeah, we're on. I might come out. I might be out there for election day, so I'll call you.
Oh, you should do that.
And if you really,
I understand that different places, a lot of places to eat in Las Vegas.
There
if
are
you really
indeed.
push me, John, I might even get you on my wife's show. Then you'd really
Yes,
get up
use your
there.
influence.
It's limited. Hey, you have been a terrific guest. We've learned a lot more about the Silver State than we knew 20 minutes ago, and we're going to keep in touch for the next 5.5 weeks. So thank you, Jon Ralston.
Always a
Thank
pleasure
you, man.
meeting you guys.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by the Jordan Harbinger Show, one of our favorite podcasts, long before they started sponsoring us. The Jordan Harbinger Show combines in-depth interviews with some of the world's most fascinating minds like Gary Kasparov and Mark Cuban. Jordan also does Feedback Friday episodes to respond to listener questions about everything from conventional conundrums like asking for a raise at work to doozies like helping a family member escape a cult. It's great how he takes the time to connect with his listeners. It's one of our favorite parts of the show. Plus, it's a great complement to this podcast here. You might hear the latest news about the midterm elections and analysis on what to expect in swing states. On the Jordan Harbinger Show, you'll learn useful information from a heavy-hitting interview with Chris Voss, a former FBI negotiator with brilliant insights into keeping your cool and closing the deal when everything's on the line. And that's just the beginning. It is a must-listen along with our show, James.
It really is. And I was a fan before they sponsored it. And what I like about that guy is he's what they call a polymath. You can go. Our topics are generally and happily so. We tend to be mostly political. He's not mostly any one thing. I mean, he's all over the map, and he's very knowledgeable and very curious guy. And you just learn a lot every time you listen to him.
And whether Jordan is conducting an interview or giving advice to a listener, you'll find something useful that you can apply to your own life in every single episode of the Jordan Harbinger Show. That could mean learning how to ask for advice the right way, or it could be just discovering a slight mindset tweak that changes how you see the world. Search for the Jordan Harbinger Show. That's H-A-R, like the first three letters in hard, B-I-N-G-E, as in how you'll want to start catching up on his episodes, and R on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find the link in our show notes. All right, now the always excellent questions from our listeners. James, we're going to start off with Kate in West Seattle, Washington. She's a big fan of the show, and she's a fan of Magic Spoon. Yay, Kate. She wants to know, how likely is it that DeSantis committed trafficking and fraud? As a policy, doesn't moving asylees make the job of ICE and immigration courts much harder?
Obviously, it does. The morality of taking asylum seekers from Venezuela and lying to them and sending them to Cape Cod and promising them stuff. I know they have a hell of a civil case, and they ought to sue him for as much as they can possibly get. That's what I think. I think his civil exposure is considerable. And there's something that's going on in politics, and you see it in DeSantis, let's go to Massachusetts. You see Gavin Newsom putting billboards in Florida and Texas. You see the Oz Fetterman campaign is about, I don't know, they criticize his tattoos or something. The American politics is starting to get away from what it should be about, voters and people, and it's become too gimmicky, I think. But in this sense, gimmicks are just gimmicks. This was a cruel hoax, and I do think that DeSantis has some civil liability from these people for false premise. You just can't lie like that to people.
It clearly was a hoax. He hired a plane with taxpayers' money. These asylum seekers aren't coming to Florida, they're coming to Texas. So he goes to Florida, They lie to them about the great benefits they're going to get in Massachusetts. The plane touches down in Florida, so you can say they came from Florida for just a brief moment. So I think you're right.
Yeah, I guarantee you, there's plenty of lawyers, plenty of lawyers in Florida like nothing better than to sue Ron DeSantis.
Right. Kenny in San Diego, California said, let's assume for a moment the Democrats retain their majority in the Senate but lose the House. Even if a majority of Democratic senators voted to eliminate the filibuster, wouldn't their legislative wish list be dead on arrival because the Republican-controlled House would reject their proposals? Yes, Kenny, you're right. And look, even if they keep the House and they get to 52, 53 Democratic senators, they aren't going to eliminate the filibuster. The question is, can you create a couple carve-outs for voting rights or something like that and set somewhat different rules? And that may well be possible. And let me just tell you, on this matter of the filibuster, nobody is a virgin. I mentioned it before when Mitch McConnell talks about how sacred this is. He didn't think it was so sacred in 2017 when he changed it for Supreme Court justices. So it's going to be, if the Democrats keep a majority and they keep the House, a majority in the Senate and they keep the House, I think they'll try to carve out for a couple issues. James.
Yeah, I think also like, ambassadors and, that kind of stuff. It's just the Senate does that. So
right. Well, you can get them with a majority vote now.
Okay, so you're right. It's not, if you don't keep the House, it's going to be marginally good if you have the Senate in terms of the filibuster. But the other thing is that they don't keep the House, they're going to shut down this January 6th committee. All right, they could just turn over everything they have to a Senate committee because they're not through. They're not through, and they made the right choice to cancel a hearing because of the storm. I think that was smart because the storm is going to drive the news cycle between now and the end of the week. So you want that. That was a good move they made. But the big thing about if you keep the Senate, they can preserve and continue that investigation, which is really critical. And from everything that I'm told, there's more stuff every day coming over the transom. They're having a hard time digesting all the stuff they're getting. So you don't want that thing to go away.
Mm-hmm. James, next, Pete in Raleigh, North Carolina, asked, does the president's approval rating even matter? The Democrats who disapprove of Biden are not going to vote Republican in 2024, and Biden's low approval ratings seem to be having zero effect on the midterms. We talked about that with Jon Ralston, and I think, Pete, you're on to something. I think there's more decoupling than there has been traditionally. You certainly see it in your state of North Carolina. Sherry Beasley, the Democratic candidate, is running a good 7 or 8 points ahead of Biden's approval ratings. And I think the one thing that low approval ratings used to do, it would bring down the Democratic, it would bring down the vote of the party in power, the party that had the presidential had the low approval rating, because it was a drag. It was people were despondent about things. I think because of abortion and Trump and a number of other issues, I don't think the Democratic turnout is going to be down because of Joe Biden's approval ratings, James.
I don't either. What you worry, because it's so been coupled to presidential approval, both year elections, and this year significantly less. However, I'd much rather be running 7 points ahead of 44 than 7 points ahead of 40.
Yeah.
you know, it certainly thus far seems to be less significant than it has traditionally been. I do think Dobbs had something to do with that. I do think that the razor-thin Democratic majorities make them less threatening to people, maybe. I don't know. But it is a correct observation as of now that presidential approval is not correlated to congressional vote as it typically has been. That's a very defensible and true statement.
Frank in Broward County, Florida, asked, do you think that Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, overreacted with her massive attack on Trump from several different angles? Is there a risk of blowback? Frank adds that he bought the Raycon earbuds and they are fabulous. Frank, I don't think so. First of all, let's remember, this is a civil case where there is a different burden of proof. And secondly, just scanning what she had. I mean, the amount of lies, duplicities, and seeming fraud that Trump committed. Just one of the easiest to describe is saying that the condo he owned was 31,000 square feet when it was really only 11,000 square feet. James, is an old expression, old Southern expression of lying when the truth would be better. Poor old Trump doesn't know what the truth is, so he lied about everything, and I think he's got considerable civil exposure here.
Well, I do too, and remember that Weselberg has to testify truth here. He's going to jail for 7 years. And they apparently think a lot of their case. In this I do know. In civil litigation, you get everything. There's nothing that they're not going to get. If you take the Fifth, it's a negative.
It is.
Find a fact is permitted to make a negative inference from that. Well, Trump ain't not about to, and they will call him as a witness.
He already has taken it, 440
times?
Taken
into deposition. They'll drag his ass in there again and make him take the Fifth again. Don't worry about it. And it's so bad. It's so bad that he had to put himself in a position where to find a fact and make a negative inference, because I'm sure his lawyer said, man, you can't testify about nothing. Because as John Dowd said, who represented him first, you can't put him in front of a deposition. He'd lie about it. He don't know the truth if it hit him in the head. And yeah, I think there's more to find out and more to learn, and there's more to be shocked about.
Yeah, no, I agree. Vicky in Tempe, Arizona, wants to know, how likely would it be if Biden decides not to run for a second term that he would anoint someone like Pete Buttigieg or any other candidate other than Kamala Harris?
It's highly unlikely, and I don't know. Even if he anointed Harris, I don't think he would do that. I mean, he would certainly say nice things about it, and I don't know how impactful it would be. I really don't.
Yeah,
I don't.
I agree. If he doesn't run, that's a wide open race.
Absolutely.
Yeah. KB in Portland, Oregon wants to know, is there a way to arrange for Texas and Florida taxpayers to pay for busing immigrants to Cape Cod and other places? There are 11.2 million job openings in this country, and a bunch of those are in the food processing. There's more work than people are willing to do work, and Florida set aside $12 million for this purpose already. Why not take them up on it? Well, KB, first of all, one of the great myths is that it's only Texas and not Florida, but Texas and Arizona that are suffering from people coming across the border. There are more people in protective custody, I suppose you'd call it, in California than there are in Texas, and there are a lot in New York. This is a really complicated issue. Most of these people aren't coming in here because they're bad people. They're coming in here because they're good people trying to get away from bad systems and repression. So I think it's a shame that people like Governor Abbott and Governor DeSantis would prefer to demagogue this issue rather than talk about how you find a real solution.
The first thing is, this should be a good issue for Democrats. Immigrants are popular. Listen to me. Immigrants are popular. What people don't like is disorder. That upsets them. The second thing is, what do you think the solution to this labor shortage is? They can't find people working in nursing homes. They can't find people to work in restaurants. They can't find people to work in hotels. Well, why don't the business community, who desperately needs this, step out front and work with people? This country benefits so greatly from immigration. And, when you see these people that are complaining about immigrants, you see people from Kentucky or Tennessee, but no immigrant wants to go to Eastern Kentucky. You don't have to worry. You're totally safe. All right? I promise you. You don't. If you're in West Virginia, don't worry. They're not fleeing Venezuela to come. They want to go to Houston, or they want to go to Miami, they want to go to New York or Chicago or something where the jobs are. So I think this could be a favorable issue for Democrats, but it is the reality. I mean, we're having all these asylum seekers. by the way, one of the things that people want to come to this country is they read the news. They get the news in Guatemala. They see the number of job openings they have in the United States. They see employers, being able to quit. Employees quit, find another job. They're not immune to it. Part of the draw here is this strong-ass labor market we got.
Yeah, I agree. Final question is from Roy in Afton, Virginia, who asked, James, you would know this better than anyone. Is there still a place for cold calls and door-to-door visits in a modern campaign?
The answer is probably not as much cold calls, but because you're going to want some information about the voter. But there is, and if you do it enough, and I've come to change my mind and be a little more for this, it can make a difference. The other thing is there's just a terrible problem of loneliness in this country. And if you talk to some of these canvassers, these people really like that somebody comes by and sees them. Is it going to have a massive effect? No, but if it's started early and done smartly with the right kind of list, I think I used to be very contemptuous of this kind of stuff. I am less so today. I'm less so today. And, you can just see how when you go to the Safeway and you can see this lady ahead of you and she's checking and you get impatient and you stop and you think, man, that might be one of that lady's 1 or 2 times a day she has human contact and she wants to, chew the fat with the checkout person. That's understandable. And they just the studies that you see on, we're fortunate because we're old and we have families and we have, shows and we have friends and we get invitations to go to dinner and things. That's not most people's life. It's really not. It's a real freaking problem. And if you target it right, and particularly, older voters, when you check their voting history, you could scrape up a half a point or two here somewhere.
Speaking of what you do in political campaigns, I want to mention a tribute this week given to one of the great people we've ever known in first politics and then journalism, Mark Shields of the NewsHour, who was a mentor to one James Carville, who gave a beautiful speech about Mark at that wonderful celebration at Georgetown University this week.
Yeah, it was moving, to say the least. I think they're going to put it online. The thing about Mark Shields is he is rare in that in his kind of gut, he was a political operative. He kind of, he worked, and it was fun to see Governor Sevilla said, I'd forgotten that her dad was John Gilligan, the former governor of Ohio.
Mark worked for in 2 campaigns.
And Mark reached the pinnacle of journalism. If you're on the NewsHour for 30 frickin' years, that's the pinnacle of journalism, all right? You have a syndicated column, that's the pinnacle of journalism. And the point I've made, and to make it anybody, is H.L. Mencken said the only way for a journalist to look at a politician is down. Well, that was not Mark Shields. And to people in the political business, he has always been a kind of a champion. He liked politicians. He liked political operatives. He wasn't against posters or anything else that you get this claptrap from. And I made the point with Mary, and I was telling her about it. She said, well, I really want to go like you. He didn't hate us. And the point she was making, not Mary and James, but just political people, what we did, what we choose to do with our lives. And Mark was always he didn't hate anybody, really. He wrote very sympathetic about most people, little people, for sure. But he wasn't just an insightful political operative. He wasn't just an insightful commentator. He was just the overall sort of guy. And that joke about when Chris Christie gets in the bathtub, he's so fat the water level in the toilet rises. It's got to be one of the great jokes of all time.
Well, there were another. Remember when Bush appointed Bernie Kerik, he said he's got more skeletons than the Harvard Scientific Lab.
Right.
But he was my dear friend. He was the most engaging, decent, enjoyable, funny, insightful person I think I've ever known. And
He might be.
I came home last night, James, and it was just these incredibly mixed emotions. First of all, just thinking about what everyone said. You were just terrific, as were the others, and how wonderful that was, and all the memories and all the sadness that he's not with us anymore. But what a great life Mark Shields led.
Man, if that guy in his death could see one thing, he would want to watch his granddaughter play basketball.
He would want to watch Frances play basketball, and the great tribute she gave to her grandfather. This kid is 16 years old. And Carville, I told you afterwards, you're ready to come out of retirement when she runs for office.
I'm telling you. By the way, I had a blue blazer and khaki pants on because that was Mark's uniform. She was talking about when he went to Costa Rica, he'd even bring a bathing suit. But what a wonderful young girl. I guess she's a sophomore in high school. And you wanted to go to Wake Forest. I said, well, I know a pretty good women's college basketball coach by the name of Kim Mulkey.
At LSU.
They're going to win the national championship this year coming up.
Well, we will see, but let's just agree that we miss Mark Shields, but we were lucky to have known him.
And we were lucky to be able at that wonderful ceremony. I spent my time talking to Father Tom Reese, who I've always admired and never met before. And the whole time I was at the reception, I just talked to him, and I missed. I didn't see y'all. Maureen Orth sent me a real nice text. I just missed a lot of people. I wish I had stayed. I wish Mary could have come. She had COVID, and you don't want to have COVID in that crowd. That's not a good idea.
Well, there's gonna be a tape of it, so everybody can watch it. Okay, Mark Shields, rest in peace. We love you. And your temperature at night can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality. If you wake up too hot or too cold, we highly recommend you check out Miracle Brand's self-cooling bed sheets. Inspired by silver-infused fabrics made by NASA, Miracle Brand makes temperature-regulating bedding so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. Since we started using Miracle Brand's self-cooling bed sheets, you stay comfortable every night, all night, thanks to Miracle Brand's thermo-regulating sheets, unique self-cooling properties. Now, even better, they're self-cleaning. Thanks to their infusion of natural silver that prevents 99.9% of bacterial growth, they stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets. So forget all those gross odors. Miracle sheets are also luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands. Their sheets use a premium 500-thread sateen weave that is made with USA-grown Supima cotton, one of the highest quality cottons in the world, as James has told us. So stop sleeping on bacteria with Miracle Brand sheets. Their design makes them so much better for your skin with less bacteria to clog your pores, which means fewer breakouts and other skin problems. They are cool, comfortable, and perfect for a great sleep, Mr. Carville.
Yeah, they are. And this is why I'm so enthusiastic about this product. First of all, anecdotally, I know growing up in Louisiana that you when you're cool, you sleep a lot better. That's been known that for a long time. That's not just anecdotal. That is proven. I mean, they have all these people that do a lot of sleep research. Let me tell you, there's a lot of people spend a lot of money on a good night's sleep, and the ambient temperature is a real key to getting a good night's sleep, and this is a product that can control that. Common sense tells you should use this. Science buttresses what your common sense thinks. It's totally validating. Temperature is a large determinant on how good a sleep you get, and this deals with that in a very effective way.
Yeah, it sure does. So go to trymiracle.com/war room or try it today. We've got a special deal for our listeners. Be sure to use our promo code WARROOM at checkout to save 40% off and get 3 free towels. And Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're not 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Brand. Go to trymiracle.com/warroom and use the code WARROOM to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/war room. A thank you, Miracle Brand, for sponsoring this episode. You also can find the links in our show notes. And you know, James, it's hard to imagine a more disingenuous event than the Mitch McConnell, Kristen Sinema political love fest at the McConnell Center this week. The Republican leader said the Arizona Democrat is the most effective freshman senator he has ever seen. Well, she did block tax increases on the rich, like private equity executives. She also pledged full-fledged support for the filibuster. We know if Republicans take back the White House and the Senate, McConnell, if convenient, would deep six the filibuster, just as he did in 2017 to win confirmation for Supreme Court justices. This really was a charade. James, I have, for the most part, been not only understanding, but even supportive of Joe Manchin. He represents a 70% Republican state. And I think the efforts he's made, I know it doesn't please some Democrats, doesn't please me sometimes. I think he deserves credit. Sinema, it seems to me, is just more interested in playing games, raising money, and getting attention. And I don't think neither Sinema nor McConnell really cares much about the institution of the Senate.
Well, first of all, I think Senator Manchin has done, on the whole, a pretty damn good job. You know, given the fact that he represents a state that the Democrats hadn't carried a single county in since 2008. I don't know Senator Sinema, but I know people that know her and people that watch her, and she's not going to run for re-election as a Democrat in Arizona in 2024. That's pretty clear. She's not going to win the primary. A lot of people think she's just going to run for president, and she's just on this.
Which party?
Loved it now, and people do say that she is very smart. I mean, she's very smart, and she's got an agenda, but her agenda is not a second term as a Democratic senator from Arizona. That's not in the cards.
Well, she ran for president, James. Which party?
I don't know. Whichever place she would get the most attention.
Yeah.
Maybe a third party. I don't know. And of course, the chances that she's going to get elected president are nil. The chances that she opens a lobbying shop in Washington are about 99.99995%.
Well, I want to find out where
hedge fund people owe her. I mean, obviously, Manchin then put the hedge fund to carried interest in the bill so she could say, well, look, I knocked it out so I can vote for it. I mean, that you could smell that thing coming from
and raise some campaign money.
Right. But that I just don't see that she has any intention of running for re-election as a Democrat in 2024 because she will lose the primary by 35, 40 points.
I agree.
That's a good enough outrage for both of us.
Hey, thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Don't forget to send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Following this episode, we'd appreciate it if you'd check out the links to our sponsors, HoldOn Bags, The Jordan Harbinger Show, and Miracle Brand in the show notes. We deeply thank you for supporting them. When you do, it helps make this podcast happen. So to keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. Please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our War Room planning.